Hey folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 3:30 Central Texas time. And folks, you were excited, right? And then you saw the SEC respond to Richard Hart. And then you're so emotional. But here's the thing. We got Donovan on today, and he's going to remind you that there are people watching. They're watching from the wings. They see what's going on here. And a lot of times you got to be reminded of that, of how exciting it is to be a part of this community. And folks, I'm just really excited because I was on that, world record, right? Remember that world record thing that Matty Allen set where we had all the YouTubers on and we had the Hex conference and all that. I got a chance to meet Donovan from DIY investing. And you know what's so cool? He's one of us. It's so cool to see people and to realize, you know what? There's so many of us out there, when people come into this stuff, they're like, hey, we come for the number, go up, man. Let's come for the money, right? But what's amazing is I think what keeps people engaged in all this is that the purpose of why we're doing this whole thing is it's significant. We're fighting for something that's real, right? And that's for the future of one another. And we always say this on the channel is that, you know what? We got to consider others in addition to ourselves. We only win together. And that's obviously, Richard Hart sees that too. That's why he's an advocate. But folks, it's finally, we're seeing some light and it's so encouraging to me. And I just want to continue that momentum today. Donovan, who has the channel DIY Investing, has 85,500 followers. To us in our community, that's like he is a YouTube star, right? But you're going to get to hear his story in a different way. You're going to get to meet him like you typically do here on Crypto Heartbeat. And I'm super excited for that because he is well known. He's a big fan of this ecosystem and for a lot of different reasons. So, folks, let's welcome to Crypto Heartbeat for the first time, Donovan, DIY Investing. What's up, man?
Thank you so much for that intro. I've got to say that everybody inside the Hex and PulseChain community has by far the best intros. Like they're even better than my intros. So shout out.
Dude, thanks. Appreciate that. No, it's really cool. Well, a lot of what happens too is if you really want to build your channel, you don't do live streams. That's number one. And two, you don't do a long intro. I've learned that the hard way. But more importantly, a lot of this is documenting this amazing story, which has been this PulseChain launch, and really the growth of this community. And that's what I like to do. And so welcome. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks so much for being a part of the community. And, I just want to get a chance for people to get to know you. You've got some fans in our community that have been watching you for years. I had a couple of my folks reach out and go, hey, I've been watching Donovan for a long time. Super excited to have him on. So for those of you who don't know you and your background, I know you've been in for 8+ years. Tell us about your history, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I got into crypto 8 years ago. It would have been buying my first Bitcoin. That was how I got introduced. And that would have been in 2016. Bitcoin would have been worth like $450 at that time. So that was my first introduction into it. But then like prior to that, I'd pretty much just been like kind of going through a lot of different crap between like I spent time in a couple different psych wards. I got sent to a therapy program for 65 days. And then after all of that, I got sentenced to 45 days in like juvenile detention. So I ended up like having all of this like turmoil and not being like with the right people and having bad influences and stuff. So like I had just gotten out of juvenile detention after all of these like 2-3 years of this other stuff. And I remember like being inside of juvenile detention and just like there was this big round table. I remember just like laying my head down and praying because like I didn't know what else to do. I just knew my whole life was falling apart. And like at that point, it was like me finally just admitting there was nothing I could do, but I just kept getting in my own way. So I just pretty much trusted God at that point. And it was interesting because it was like as soon as I got out of there, one of my friends that, I really hadn't hung out with that much hit me up. I went over to his house with another one of my buddies that happened to be over there. And he was just looking at the price of Bitcoin. And this was like 2015. So he had just made his YouTube channel, started covering like price movements and things. And then he was showing me the price of Bitcoin and how it goes through these big boom periods and these big crashes. And we had just finished the 2015 bear market. And it was the very ending of that. And Bitcoin had just kind of made its first higher high. So he was like, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to moon. It's going to take off. And so I got really excited because it was like my senior year in high school before I dropped out. One of the last things I remember like learning before I dropped out, because I got sentenced to juvenile detention, which was why I dropped out. Like I wasn't going to graduate. So before I got sentenced, one of the last things we learned in my government class was about the Federal Reserve. And I just like could not understand how like something like that could even exist. So then I did even more. I watched a YouTube video for Mike Maloney explaining the Federal Reserve, and then it really made like, well, he exposed all of the red flags, whereas like in the school that you're taught that it's just this beneficial thing that we need. So when that happened, it was only a few months later that I met up with my friend and he shares with me the chart of Bitcoin. So like it kind of just made so much sense in my head when he explained peer-to-peer, decentralized, be your own bank, all of these things that Bitcoin was. It really drew me into it. And so it was kind of from that point on where I started hanging out with him every day. He started teaching me everything that he knew, which wasn't much. We were both just like looking at like candlestick patterns on Google and stuff.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't much knowing there. And so that was 2016. Throughout 27, that was when I was living in my grandma's basement. I didn't have a car or anything. So it was pretty much my friend would come pick me up. We'd go and hang out and trade and look at charts and stuff. And it was him selling me his old laptop. That was how I finally got like a system to be able to look at charts for the first time. And it was also like him in 2016. He lived in a shack outside of his parents' house because he got kicked out of like his apartment. And there was nowhere for him to go because their house was full. And so they had a tool shed. Like, I'm not even kidding, an actual shack with generators and tools and things. And him and his dad went and screwed in like a wood frame into the corner of this little 10 by 5 building. And he slept in that for like the whole winter. And I live in Utah, so like it gets like -25 at certain points in the winter.
Wow.
And that's where he was. But throughout that time, like that was when he was building a Discord server. That's when he was like even focusing more on trading and crypto. That was right at the end of 2016, 2017 when things started taking off. And he went from the shack out of his parents' house to $1 million living in Las Vegas within a year. So like it was him that really introduced me to the whole aspect of crypto. It was him paying half a Bitcoin for a trading course from a guy that pretty much taught me everything that like is what I use today. And so it was that whole 2016, 2017 cycle that was able to kind of just like allow me to have like a new outlet away from drugs, away from the same people I was hanging out with, because that's pretty much all I was doing before. That's to be honest, that's how I learned about Bitcoin was drugs, like black market websites and things. So like
Yeah.
that was my introduction. So like in a way, like I was using Bitcoin for the wrong reasons, but because of Bitcoin, I was also able to like stop all of those things that were like what weren't serving me anymore, and then able to really just focus on something that was a lot more positive, because what Bitcoin was in 2016 was more of a libertarian movement, full
Yep.
decentralized, be your own bank. And I honestly feel like that's where we've strayed far from at this point in 2024 now. But that's what's drawn me back with like PulseChain and Hex, is like I feel like it has a lot of those same exact values from like the original days of crypto. And seeing the community so much more driven, like actually as a community where everything that's being done is being supported by the community itself. You just don't see that in other projects. It's always being done by the project themselves. They always have to either like sell on to the market to realize the gains to be able to do those things. And at the end of the day, it's almost a snake eating its own tail. But the vision of what Bitcoin was and what blockchain was, I feel like Hex and PulseChain kind of embodies those original characteristics. So that's, to reiterate all of this back to one universal point, like that's kind of, what's drawn me back into this. Is I just think that, what originally got me into crypto and what it is now, it's like the last kind of remembrance of that is like what exists inside of this community.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate the fact that you see the same things I see, right? I'm 51 years old and you're in your 20s, right? And we see the same thing, right? And I think that we're the original OGs when it comes to hating authority, right? The Gen
Right.
Xers. And we see what's happening, right? Gen Xers are coming into leadership in the country and it's like, screw this, right? And there's that libertarian idea, but I think there's something also I just want to point out, because I'm fascinated with your story because it really resonates with me.
Mhm.
People throughout our community have seen tough times, right? And you talk about this, going to juvenile detention and kind of seeing the light, if you will. Is it there's a lot of people I think that have faced difficult times or are currently facing difficult times. It sounds like um, it actually was a part of setting you up for your future is having those difficult times early on. Do you see it that way now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why like I'm so thankful for the way that my parents raised me and stuff is because like I know that I had way more than most people. Like I was probably like upper middle class growing up. But the way that my dad lived was like always like save, 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 like anti-debt, like just be
Yep.
real, reserved. And I feel like a lot of that type of stuff rubbed off on me. And so it's like having his perspective of being really minimal and then having to go through hard experiences, it sucks, but at the same time, like when you already like have your values in place of what you want as a person, like money just adds to what you already are. And so it's like if you're, a miserable piece of crap, you're just going to be even more so a miserable piece of crap the more money you have. And so it's like going through those struggling times, it humbles you to the point where you have to reassess like your whys, like what is the reason you're doing all of this. And I think that the last bear market was just the most absolute, most humbling experience I could have had because, like, it was me being in Palmdale, California, right after the 2018 bear market at the top of the cycle. My friend that I've been talking about with he fired me because he was losing money too, and he like ran off with his girlfriend at the time, and so I moved to Palmdale with my friend, and I didn't even know what Palmdale was, the literal butt crack of California. Like, don't ever go there, you'll get robbed. But like we moved out there, and I remember like 15 days into this like 1 month stay, and I'm like, man, I got like $30,000. Like, I can't stay out here. Like, I don't even have a car. Am I supposed to work or anything like that? And so then I was just kind of stuck out there. And I remember praying at this time as well. This was like the next big defining shift in my life. I remember praying and just being like, God, like, please, if you can just give me an opportunity to like make money for my family. That was my concern, was like, I thought that the world was going in a place that I didn't want to see it. And I felt like the only thing I could do to help would be to have money and just have security. Cause that was just my thought process. So it was like, like I want money, but like at the same time, I want to be able to help my family. So going through the 2018 bear or the most recent bear market, I feel like I kind of lost touch with that. And I started thinking more about like, what am I going to do with this? Like, what could I do? What could I buy? This and that. And so going through all of that, like it was just a really good experience. And I felt like it really instilled the original why. Like, what am I doing? Why am I investing into these markets? What is the whole point of this? And so, yeah, I definitely think that like your trials are the things that ultimately define you as a person. And it's, how you adjust from all of those is how you're going to be able to, whether you upgrade or whether you just pull back.
Yeah.
So
Dude, that's so awesome. Well, here you are, what I would consider a successful YouTuber, right? And I always am curious, here you're a guy who's done well. You understand the cycles. You've put in the time too. I can tell. I've watched your content and you know what you're talking about.
thank
But
you.
you're also kind of a macro guy who's like, hey, I understand these cycles and I'm going to play them right. Let me ask you this: why do you continue to do it? You've done well. You're probably going to do really well this next cycle. Why do you continue to make content? Like what drives you?
Um, that's a good question because, like, honestly, I haven't really even thought about that. I would just say my family, like making sure that like I can like have security for those people. In the last bull market, like it wasn't like I reached out to my mom and was like, "Hey, mom, I want to buy your house." My mom like was coming up on this deadline where she was supposed to have money to pay off her house, and so like I had money in the bank, so I paid it off. And
Yeah.
that's why I want money, is because like you never know when something like that is going to happen. And it's like, had I have not done it right then and there, I wouldn't have probably been able to in the same way in the bear market. So it's like, or
Right.
if I would have, I mean, I would have either way, but it's like, you know, this much money just sitting in cash in your bank versus this much money in crypto at the bottom. Like, obviously, you'd rather do the cash. So it's like doing that type of stuff. It wasn't even that I was like, I had it in my mind that, like, oh, I was going to buy my mom's house. Like, it was some big goal. It's just something that needed to be done. And if I wasn't the one to do it, like, my mom just doesn't have a house. So it's like, obviously, I'm going to do that. So,
Yeah.
like, that's really the only reason I ever want money, is like, I want to do cool things. Like, I want to buy a ranch. I want to move down south. I want to like I love hunting, I love fishing, I love all that type of stuff. So it's like my plan is to pretty much just have so much money that I can live like a redneck out in the sticks somewhere, be by completely by myself alone, and like have my friends, family, and have a few thousand acres where I can move all of my family and like
Yeah.
food plots, like farm, just stuff I've pretty much done my whole life. Like I nothing will change for me having more money aside from just like mainly enjoying like the lifestyle of like outdoors more.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned twice about praying and that being a pivotal moment. I think it's hard. A lot of times people don't talk about their faith, right? Especially when it comes to like, crypto stuff. And of course, when you come on Crypto Heartbeat, that's what you end up talking about. Um, how important is that to you, and how does that play into this? Because it sounds like these were big shifts for you. Is that a component with what you're doing, or is it just, hey, these were like episodes of my life? How does that fit into to how you live your life now?
Yeah. Well, so like I was born into a Christian family. So like my whole life that was like my thought process until I hit probably puberty. I don't know about the
Yeah.
age, but like puberty, that was like when I just started like being more defiant, I guess you could say, and pretty common across the board with a lot of kids. But um that was when I just started like thinking more for myself, like thinking like, man, maybe my family's wrong about a lot of this stuff. Maybe they're full of crap. And so like honestly, I went back and forth for a long time. Like I got really into like I just call it like new age philosophy because that's
Mhm.
basically what it is. It's just a combination of every single thing that's not Christianity all in one
Yeah,
weird
wrap it
like
up.
yeah, whatever you want of it, so to speak. And I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
really into that. I mean, there's an all-seeing eye behind me, and that was
yeah.
like I leave that there because it reminds me of like the time before when I was still like kind of confused. Because like at this point, like I'm just a Christian, like I just believe in Jesus. And
Yeah.
my grandpa, he like is kind of like the big staple of that because like I was into the new age. I had a lot of really like supernatural experiences with like the demonic realm. Like
Wow.
like to, like I could get into a lot of craziness with that type of stuff that could just go into a wormhole. But like ultimately it was having those experiences that drove me back to Christ. And
Mhm.
then it was like I had a few experiences where it was just like a defining moment where I just knew without a doubt and I quit questioning it because like I'd looked into every religion, I'd looked into every philosophy. Like I didn't think that there could be a provable God, but I knew that there was something higher that existed. And it was that knowing that there was something greater and having this void of like, what is that for me? Like what is that higher power? And having this like unquenchable void where it's like I need to fill it with God. And so looking for God in all of these places, unable to find it, I really wasn't even looking for Christ. He found me. It was like I
Yep.
was going in the complete opposite direction. And that's the way it works. Like I
Yep.
don't believe that I was like it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with him pulling me towards him. So that's the way I look at it. Like it was me every time I prayed, I had a huge shift happen. I prayed to Jesus every time and didn't even believe in him. It was just like
Wow.
was just what I know or knew at the time. But like at this point, going back and having these experiences, it was really like my dabbling with the new age that drove me back to it because it was like I just had too many crazy experiences, like was really into psychedelics and was exploring into that sort of realm of things. And like it just got to the point where like the more I got into some of those philosophies, the more I realized how empty they were, and the more that I stopped questioning what I already knew deep inside with my faith in Christ, the more that I was like, just finally the void ended. Basically, it was just
Yeah.
this huge thing that was like no longer there anymore.
Dude, it's crazy. And this I'm surprised because we didn't talk about this ahead of time at all.
Mhm.
And, you know, what's amazing to me is how many people I talk to in crypto, and especially those who have seen difficult times, and I hear a very similar story. And it's amazing, I think about your experience that I can relate to is, you go your own way, right? And you go your own way and you investigate these things. And what's amazing to me is here you are sharing, you came up against something that was not good, right? You saw this demonic side, and of course psychedelics and all of that stuff. And um, I think it's really interesting that you and I probably see things very similarly, right? We probably process them differently, but Let me ask you this. I don't think there's any accidents, right? I don't think we've evolved from a newt and, and a monkey, and here we
Right.
are, right? So I believe that there's a purpose for us to be here. And
Mhm.
that, I always think about the story of the prodigal son, right? His father financed his debauchery, right? He went off and ended
Right.
up getting to the point where he wasted all of his inheritance. But it wasn't until he knew and understood who his father was, right? He understood his nature and character and he came back to him. And that's when he got the ring, right? That's when he
Right.
got the authority. And I look at you, right? Here you're a guy who's got influence, you got resources, you're a smart guy, you're young, you got your whole life ahead of you. And, I see these moments, right? And I'm not trying to project this on you, but do you see it as, hold on, there may be more here? And what I mean by that is there may be more of what your purpose and what you're to do, right? I think a lot of times I think the same way as you. It's like, I want security, I want a big plot of land, and I want people to leave me alone.
Right.
And I know that that's, it's really appetizing, but in some respects, there's a calling, and it's
Mhm.
something that, most people don't talk about.
Mhm.
Do you do you ever sense that you may be in this position for a more important reason of what's happening potentially in the world, potentially with the financial system, potentially with, education and helping people understand, like, do you have kind of something that you could articulate, like, hey, yeah, I think there may be a bigger reason that I'm doing this than just, hey, let's all get rich.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, obviously it started as let's get rich. I think that's everybody's
Sure, of
introduction to
course.
crypto.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But then it's like the values, like what is crypto? What problem does it solve? That's what gets everybody like really on board with the movement of it.
Yeah.
And honestly, like my view on the world is like pretty bearish to be completely honest. And like a lot of that does have to do with my Christian perspective, I think. Like
Sure, sure.
um I don't go around preaching like end times doom and gloom like a lot of people do, although I think like it's important to at least be prepared for anything. But that's universal across the board in life. Like you want to be prepared regardless of what happens. So it's like my thought with all of that is I don't let it hang over to my like my head or anything, but all of what I do and like when I got into crypto, I really believed in blockchain. But
Yeah.
then when I became a follower of Christ, it literally just got to the point where I was like, blockchain is going to control everybody and enslave the whole human race. And then I was like, well, this is contradicting. Like, what am I doing
Mhm.
now? And so, like, I've built up all of this, and I'm at the point now where I don't even really believe in crypto. Like, what it could do is amazing. Like, the benefits of what blockchain is, the reasons I got into it in the beginning, what it could actually do is truly magnificent. I just don't believe in humans' abilities to self regulate that system, considering the ability, if you look at all human history, every single empire has always fallen. We repeat the same mistakes. If you look at every fiat currency, it's always crashed around 80 to 100-year cycles since the 15 or 1600s when they first had one. I think it was Spain. Anyways, you're looking at all of these, and humans just are very cyclical. They constantly repeat things. I have no doubt in my mind humans are going to repeat the same mistakes. Where we're at right now, like we've just had all of this 100-year bull run, basically prosperity since the Great Depression, and we've had all of this great times. America was so prosperous, but we're at the point now where we've had too many great times where people in my generation, and only progressively getting worse the younger generations from me, they don't know what hard times are like. They don't have any sort of idea how to take care of an animal, how to have like basic veterinarian sort of like knowledge, and like how to
Yep.
be able to outsource medications. Like they don't understand how to be able to do things on a farm, like grow vegetables, like harvest crops, like how do you till a field, how do you do all of these things. Nobody knows how to do anything. So majority of people live in cities. The second there's any sort of economic anything, like the electricity goes out or a truck can't drive food to the cities,
Yep. Yep.
most people are going to starve and they're going to die. So it's like my thought is like what I end up seeing happening is the downfall of America, the collapse of the dollar. When that happens, shiz is going to hit the fan. People are going to start starving. There will be a new government that rises up from that. When the new government rises up from that, they're going to adopt blockchain. They're going to adopt a new world payment system that'll be global. And it won't be a system that anybody wants to use, but will be forced to use because these guys have the resources and we're starving. That's
Yeah.
what I think is going to happen. That's why I don't believe in blockchain, because I feel more confident in the powers that be will use it for nefarious reasons more than I believe that the people will do anything about it. Because I look at people in my generation and like, my generation's weak. Like, we're a weak generation. Like, America has really like lost touch with its old ways. Like, people are disrespectful. The music people in my age group listen to, and it's only getting worse. Like, the culture of America today versus the culture of America 100 years ago, like, it's pretty disgusting to compare the two. You can't compare the two. Where the comparison is the beginning of a great empire versus the ending of that great empire. So I believe that that's what I'm inheriting, and that's why, like, I'm kind of bearish on the outlook of crypto. But that's why for me, it's like, I just want to be able to inform people about that, because, like,
Yeah.
I believe Bitcoin was created by the NSA specifically to be used as a spying technology for everybody's finances. So, like, seeing all of this adoption happen, I was like, it's going to happen. This is the future. Like, I knew it was, but I was like,
No.
deep down, it was like, it's not going to be for the best of humanity, in my opinion, because Bitcoin's pseudo anonymous.
Yeah.
So if we adopted like Monero or like some actual good system where we could be truly decentralized, yes, crypto could be used for the best. And I continue to maintain and push the belief and the ideology that that's how we should continue to move. However, I just have a lacking confidence in that actually happening.
So are you sure you're not 65 years old and you tell kids to get off your lawn?
Basically, I
I
think I've
swear, I was like, man, you're beyond your years. Well, okay. So are you open to an alternative view?
yeah, sure, of course.
Okay. So I just want to share this with you because you've come to the right place. And what I mean by that is this ecosystem. Here's the thing that I think is incredible. You know Richard Hart, and you've known kind of what he shared. I'm not saying lift him up as the most ideal scenario, but I look at what the purposes are, and I'm going to put on the side, NSA creating Bitcoin to enslave people. I got a good friend, and we do a podcast every Friday, and we've done it for 36 weeks, and it's called Right Side Up with Steve Staggs, and he always asks me the question. He's like, "Are you open to an alternative idea, thought?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And he said, "Well, think about this. Tools themselves are, they're essentially inert, right? The tools are, if there's a gun sitting on a table, it's going to sit on the table forever, right?
Mhm.
Literally. It,
Yeah,
it requires someone to animate the tool, right?
yeah.
And the tool can be animated in a lot of different ways, right? It's strangely, you could defend yourself with a gun. You could, kill someone with it, theoretically, unload it, and you could probably hammer in a nail and hang up a picture, right? There's a lot of things you could do, but we're the animating force in this world, right?
Yep.
And what's interesting is, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we didn't have any of this communication, right? I didn't have a cell phone until 1999, 2000. And when I think about what we have in front of us, right, how things have changed, the alternative that I would share with you is that we find that there are people out there animating these tools, right? Whether it be internet, AI, blockchain, whatever it may be. And you're somebody that I know sees those basic values, right? Like, okay, it makes sense to me. What I believe that we have here in this community and what actually sets us apart is that you've got a guy like Richard Hart from a leadership perspective who's saying, you know what, I believe that this is worth fighting for. And if we animate this tool together, right? And he would advocate, I make the case that he's advocating for us, right? He made a lot of money. He did
Mhm.
extremely well. He doesn't have to launch a layer one. He doesn't have to fight the SEC. He could literally go on an island somewhere and disappear,
Yeah.
but he's not. And he's talking about freedom of speech and freedom of movement and all of these things. And I look at that and I say, is there a possibility that it's not inevitable? I agree with you. The cycles of human behavior are pretty darn consistent. And you are 100% right about, the Federal Reserve and, dollar, as the world's reserve currency since the 1500s. I get it. But there's something really, I think, unique opportunity here that if we do work together and under this kind of leadership, I don't see many founders, maybe Hodgkinson with Cardano, but I don't see anyone else out there who literally sees what's coming. And it's funny, you're communicating exactly what I think a lot of people are seeing coming. Like, if we don't do something, this literally will enslave us. And of course, you know your Bible, and it's like, well, we'll have the mark of the beast and we won't be able to buy and sell. And you think about that, and I go, you know what? we have the ability to make a choice and we have the ability to animate these tools. Well, what would be required? Right. And I look at this and I think about OFAC compliance. I think about all the KYC stuff, and it's like, what if there was a place, right? What if, a lot of times people have called that Hexaco, right? This ideal, not that it's, it's utopian, but it's one in which, we preserve the fairness of it, right? Because we don't have capitalism, we've got crony capitalism, right? We
Right.
don't have the fairness, democracy, all that kind of stuff. And of course, meanwhile, people in Davos right now are talking about how we're going to eat bugs. So I would just say this. I want to make the case to you and encourage a guy in your, age group that has the kind of influence that this is the ecosystem. We take and we fork Ethereum. It is properly decentralized and it will continue to be. There's a point in which I think you're right. I think this whole thing fails. I think the system collapses on itself. And of course, in Revelation 17, it talks about Babylon burning in an hour, right? It could happen really fast. Well, what is that alternative? You see a guy like Elon Musk who's got, I guess internet connectivity, swirling around the planet. We may have an opportunity to have a place where people aren't, tracked and traced and have to have a social credit score. And so I just want to make the case to you that that's how we think in this community. You see a lot of people I think are smart, they're kind, for the most part, and they are, they're at some level of I've experienced hard times and I want to see the world be a better place. I may be really idealistic, but I think that we have the right building blocks if we can work together and advocate for one another. And that's unique because of the communication network. That's unique because of the infrastructure that we have. And that's something that I want to promote. And so I don't assume I would convince you at this point, but I feel like we have a responsibility and it is possible, not that we change the cycle, but that we literally free the captives, right? That's the real thing. The cycles may continue, but at least we're not literally enslaved. Because I see it very similarly to you, but I just have hope that we can do something about it.
Well, I mean, everybody should have hope. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's an important thing, regardless, because it's the only way it's the only thing that can sustain you through hard times. It's the hope that someday it could get better. So, like, that's all we can really do. My only thing with it is just the fact, like, the people that own the system, not gonna let it fall and let it be redistributed back to everybody else without like a life or death fight. And
Yeah.
so it's like, when I come down to that, it's like, well, how willing are you to fight for those views? Because like, if it came down to it, and like it really was like, hey, we're our own people, like we're our own sovereign blockchain independent thing, like we don't follow along with this stuff, that we're not going to KYC, we're not going to submit to whatever this authority is, we're not going to eat your bugs. So like, if it got to that point and then it was literally life or death, like you got to fight for that, like that comes the point of how much do you believe in it? Because like, my thought is it will be life or death. And like, if it, like, it will come to this point where you're going to have some government basically saying like, hey, you got to follow with this new way. And if you don't, like, you're enemy number one to the government, basically. So it's like, are you willing to be an outlaw in that time and potentially die and lose your life over that? I mean, for me, yeah, that's my thought process. So it's like that's my thing with it, is like, I really do believe in these things. And if a system comes overbearing and tries to take everybody's rights, of course I'd be willing to fight for that type of stuff. So it's like, I have nothing but hope and optimism for like the ability for us to do this type of stuff. I just think that the wealth is so consolidated with such a fine amount of people that the idea of us like somehow like using blockchain to redistribute that back, I don't find it likely. For the same way these families have been able, and these people and corporations and things through laws have been able to just keep all of this value passed down. So it's like, I want to see that more than anything, but I do believe wholeheartedly it will come down to a life or death scenario with it.
Yeah. Well, what rings to me is leadership matters. And one of the things that I'm just so refreshed to meet you, honestly, because here's the thing. Don't be surprised if you find yourself in leadership in troubling times, right? Here you are, you think about it, it's like I get a kick out of my son is like, "Dad, I'm gonna be a gamer, man." And I'm like, "Are you? Okay." You know, and he sees some people making money and all this stuff. And he's like, "Dad, you've got a YouTube channel. Like, I can do this." And I'm like, "You can do this, absolutely." But I think what's really interesting is here you've been practicing, and I always look at the long term and I go, why did God snatch you out of the fire? Why did you put you in this situation, make you so wise, and then give you influence? If he did not have a plan that you would utilize those skills and those gifts in the future, and you're seeing this stuff ahead of time, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's why we created the Texan token. That's why Texas independence is something we support, is because we think there needs to be a place where good people go,
Hmm.
and those things are heating up, right? I mean, we find ourselves in, I think, an election cycle here that could be absolutely pivotal on whether this thing survives or not. And so, but the good news is this kind of fourth turning that we're in does bring about a renaissance. And I'm hopeful of that. But I just want you to know I'm a big fan, and I didn't know you much before outside of your content. But it's this kind of thinking that I think you're going to find a lot of support within our community, because there's a lot of people that see things similarly. But I want to challenge guys like you who are so sharp that you may be called upon to lead in those situations. And to me, that's absolutely critical. Is leadership matters so much. And why do these, why does the Richard Hart ecosystem make sense? Is his leadership. But what I love about it is he didn't do it for us, and that's the thing. We took the responsibility on ourselves. So it's already kind of a picture of, it's almost like a training ground or preparation for a time that will come. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be life or death. I mean, just keep it this simple. If they stopped paying Social Security to people in the United States, it's over, right? You stop the payments and it's over. And so this thing does crumble and fall. But the hope that I have in all of this, from a big macro standpoint, is, you know, it starts in a garden and it finishes in a city, right? There's this big overarching thing which we understand, and you've seen the dark parts, right? You've seen the battle that's not between flesh and blood. And when you think about, all right, do I have confidence in who wins this thing? Yeah. And do I have a role in it? And so I think we're coming into very consequential times. And it's just so cool to meet someone like you who has a vision for it, has a skill set for it. I want to encourage you. I just want to, one, thank you for being a part of our community, because you bring, it's refreshing to have you here, because you're not just a guy who's a maxi, you know? So, so I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Um, what, let me ask you this, obviously everybody wants their bags to be, pumped, right? And I love it when people, bridge over and get into the pulse chain and all that. But there are some things missing. And I always feel like when you're real close to something, you don't see it for what it is. And here you're a guy who's, I would consider, be on the outside looking in. And you probably see stuff that we don't see. What do you think when you see this community and you've watched this community from the outside? What do we need to do better or differently? And what is missing that needs to be built or needs to be there that you think would really make this thing really, really exciting for others?
It's a good question. Um, well, honestly, like I think that the average thought behind Richard Hart is that it's just like he's just kind of a meme. And so like that's probably like what the average person thinks. Cause like that, like if I think about me and when he started posting all of like his different things that he was buying and wearing all this designer clothes, that's when like people were just I don't know. That's when the shift happened. Like you either loved Richard Hart and thought he was the most cool person ever, or you just thought he was just nothing, like a clown, basically. And so
Yep.
that was where that ended up taking place. And so, regardless of people's opinions, I just think that it's like everybody's focused so much on some of these other, blockchains that have came out, like Arbitrum's really came on scene, Optimism, Metis, all of these are doing these big grants and they're, pumping tons and tons of, well, millions and millions of dollars worth of their token back into these markets, these systems. So it's like seeing all of that, like there's a lot of new shiny things on the market. But that to me is also like why Pulse Chain is like valuable. Like it's something that nobody's talking about. And it offers all of the same benefits of what Ethereum does, but then it's also better. It's actually scalable. So it's like it's the ease of entry for the average person is just anybody can join, whereas with ETH you have to be basically rich, and the
Yeah.
market's not even up where it will be. So I see a lot of value in any competing chain that offers the scalability features that Ethereum doesn't have. But then also like the community of Hex and Pulse Chain and that it's so unique that like that to me is the overlying foundation of this whole entire thing. And it's for me, I wouldn't have invested into PulseChain. I wouldn't have looked into any of the other um, markets or anything like that had it not been for the community itself and just seeing how supportive and diehard they were. And I think that that's the thing that's really special about this. Like there's going to be people inside of the community that get passionate and want to build a project. I mean, I've actually been thinking about launching a token on PulseChain because me and my buddies, when I lived in Santa Monica, we launched one. And it didn't end up working out because one of our partners got hacked and it ruined the whole thing. So it didn't end up working out, but that's something I actually do want to do. And it's like being able to provide value back into early ecosystems that could potentially see a lot of growth long term. I see a lot of growth happening inside of PulseChain. And, I can't think of like a specific project that needs to like be there. There's like a lot of things that need to be there because there's almost nothing really there. Like you've got the framework of everything you need to function on chain. The only difference is all of the DeFi protocols, all of the NFT things, anything else is just, it's not there, which is why the opportunity is so ripe. So it's like, I see that, I thought maybe I could launch a token on Arbitrum. Maybe I should launch it on Metis. Maybe I should do this. But at the end of the day, it was like the community of PulseChain seems so much more unique that it's like, I think that it would actually benefit more to actually do that. So that's kind
Yeah.
of been my thought process over the last couple of months.
Well, and I think the community is the hardest thing to replicate, right?
For
You can
sure.
replicate any of the other, the technology side of things, but replicating this kind of rabid cult-like religion is kind of tough to do. But okay, so that's really how important or how much do you think it resonates, this idea that you've got your copies of your coins over on the Pulse chain? That's been a kind of a narrative piece that we
Mhm.
think has value. Do you see that as value to people outside?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that the reason they're not talking about it is just because of like the bear market mainly.
Yeah.
Like if this would have launched like this year, like at the beginning of last year, as everything started uptrending, it would have been completely different. I think more people would have been interested. It was just the fact that like most people don't know about Pulse Chain, and then it's like once they do get introduced to it, I think that that will be the narrative that catches on later down the line as Pulse becomes worth more value, as the whole ecosystem becomes worth more value. I mean, you're seeing some of these tokens like anybody could just go provide liquidity to them and then make their own trading pool. So I think that that in and of itself has a lot of value. Like I think
Yeah.
that there will be people that, see some coin pumping and then they're like, I'm going to go provide liquidity on that coin over here on Pulse Chain. And then all of a sudden, like it starts going. So it could bring a whole new plethora of opportunity for, that type of perspective. But then aside from that, like anybody that just actually wants to build something cool that they think is valuable. Like I interviewed the people at Fame for their GMX fork because I was
Yeah.
following GMX on Arbitrum. So it's like we're already kind of seeing like some of these protocols being built and people taking the initiative to add the framework for it. So I think that more of that will just come as the more money comes back into the cycle because historically speaking, altcoins really haven't done a whole lot till Bitcoin starts getting to those all-time highs and even past those all-time highs. And even though this cycle's been a little bit more hyped, it could actually do its own sort of thing a little bit in comparison. I think that it will end up like being pretty consistent with those other cycles where most likely a lot of those narratives will start catching on once Bitcoin goes into price discovery, which is why it's like good to have the positions in play beforehand, being early to capitalize on all of that before it happens. Because nobody really knows what narratives are going to stick. Like everybody's just throwing money,
Yeah.
hoping one of them ends up playing out. And, some of them are going to play out really big, some of them won't. But I do think that this one could be one that actually does play out from a number of different ways.
Yeah. Well, if you do launch a coin, I've got a name for you. You open to it?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. It's Donovan with hat. And I was hoping that you'd be okay with that, especially with your Pulse chain hat on there. It's at least a 14,000x token on the Pulse chain.
Hey, maybe one
Yeah.
today.
Anyway, I just, dude, I'm so glad to meet you and so glad that you're in the community. I love your story and this kind of redemptive story and all of this stuff. And it's cool to know that there are folks with, with real values, but also I feel like you're teaching the stuff that is going to help people win, right? It's not just degen trading and leverage and all that kind of stuff. And so, folks, if you go into the description, you will find how you can like and subscribe, but you can sub to Donovan's channel. You're also on Twitter. That's in the description as well. Um, how do you see 2024, 2025 in light of, potentially global recession? What do you think, obviously there's these cycles. What are we looking at as far as this bull run? What kind of time period are we looking for? And, when you target, I saw in your last stream that you kind of targeted a potential next top. Um, what's the cycle look like to you with, happening on?
Yeah, so we pretty much like what I'm looking at is the cycle top. Well, if we follow a normal 4-year cycle, the cycle top will be the end of the year 2025.
Okay.
October, November, December, January, somewhere in that 4-month threshold. Um, and so that's where I'm looking. However, if we front run this cycle and start breaking out quicker than prior ones, we could end up being like at a shortened cycle, and it would be more of a blow off top, which would be like top maybe the end of the year this year. So I want to see us like pull back and like reconsolidate and build a foundation, before really getting crazy into 2025. So like that's what I want to happen. I don't know what will. Seeing all of these institutions tweeting about crypto and stuff, like if you look at the valuation of a market cycle, like the institutional phase is when they start talking about stuff, and it's right in the midpoint of the cycle before the real upside sets in. So in the institutional phase, in the institutional phase of a cycle, what you'll see is like the market will kind of rally up, and then you'll see what's called like the first sell off, and then that'll take us into the big final media attention, all the retail hype and everything. So I would like to see that happen in 2025 to be more sustainable and follow a normal 4-year cycle. We'd make more money that way, in my opinion. But we're seeing the institutions talking about the stuff now, so it shows that like I've never seen them do it this early into a cycle, which is why I say we got to at least be aware of like a shortened one. So that was my thought there. But then big picture, the way you measure a cycle is from peak low to peak low. And I don't know if like it has any correlation, but if you look at the peak low of the Great Depression, that was 1929 or 32, I mean. So 1932 is the peak low of the Depression. 1929 was the top. And then if you look at the Dow Jones today, 100 years measuring peak low to peak low, the projected next bear market, Great Depression 2.0, theoretically would be 2032. That would be 100
Yep.
years from the last. So like if we're talking, I just find it so interesting how the 100-year cycle of the Dow Jones lines up with 2029 being the top, 2032 being the bottom, and 2030 is the time we're supposed to go eat bugs and move into this new system. So I
Yeah.
don't find it coincidental that we're seeing those things like lining up. Anytime you're an analyst, what you're looking is like multiple different points of interest that like show confluence at a certain point. The
Yep.
more of those that you have overlapping, the stronger the signal. So it's like seeing them, all the people that run the world talking about this at this certain time frame, and then seeing the 100-year cycle supposedly being a topping point at that exact time frame. I'm looking at that like, maybe we are actually going to see like an entire cycle top at the end of this decade. So that's why for me, I'm a little bit bearish, because I really won't be surprised to see like the whole shebang end at the end of this decade. So that's
Yeah.
why it's like, if I have money, it's great. If I lose all of it, that's fine too. Like I kind of expect that I'm going to lose everything. Like I really don't believe I'm ever going to have any money. Like
Isn't
as
that
much as
weird?
I have, I believe it's
Yeah.
all for nothing. And I find comfort in like being okay with that, because like I understand it. It's like I could lose all my money tomorrow and like it would suck, but it's not the money, so to speak. Like it's just living the life. And I think that there's going to
Yep.
be great things ahead for us, but I am a little bit skeptical about like the ending of this decade.
Yeah. Well, it is just a tool, and you having a proper perspective of where money fits into this whole in it as a tool makes a ton of sense. Well, do you know a guy named Martin Armstrong? Does that sound familiar to you?
I don't think so.
He's okay. So Martin Armstrong's an economist. He was the guy they put into jail for 9 years because he wouldn't give his computer code to Goldman Sachs. They
Really?
kept him in jail, yeah, without due process. And he's an economist, and he has a economics confidence model. And he did basically research all the way back into original kind of coinage, right? So especially the Roman coinage and all that, and
Okay.
followed these cycles. He collects all of this stuff, but he's mapped this out, and he created a really kind of an early AI system called Socrates. And
Hmm.
you can find him online at Martin Armstrong. And what's amazing, he's been called on by all kinds of governments because he's called things almost to the day, not because he's called them, but because his computer system has. And you know what's come out of it?
Hmm. What's that?
Pi, the pi symbol. And so 3.14. And so as you look at these cycles mathematically, It's 2032, just like you said, right? Another set of data basically saying, hey, this is essentially what's happened throughout history as it relates to the human condition and the financial system. And there are people, there's a reason that they're saying we're going to be eating bugs and all that. And of course, that's their plan.
Hmm.
And I think of, as men of faith who see this as an opportunity for us to animate, it's an opportunity, in my opinion, to kind of take it back. And so I'm so impressed with you and so thankful that you're supportive of the community, because it's always good to have new folks in. Thank you so much for taking your time and being transparent about it. I know this is probably a little bit different of a of an interview than most crypto things. So
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the time, honestly. Like, it's been good to have different conversations, considering all I ever talk about is crypto.
yeah,
And like, these are the type of conversations I have with like my friends, like
yeah,
real introspective on all types of fronts. And so that's really how I live my life. Like, crypto is just a small aspect of it. Like, these are the thoughts that I'm actually thinking about every single day, like things that I'm thinking about long term as well. And it's like, I don't want to talk about, well, it's not even that I don't want to talk about it, because like I don't mind talking about it. It's just that like most people don't want to hear from it in crypto. Like, I'm
yeah,
not just going to go say crazy things on Twitter, because
yeah,
that's not why people follow me. So it's like, if anybody does want to hear that, there's a time and a place like this. And then that's when it's actually fun to be able to talk about some of this, because, most people don't really know what my perspective on crypto is, because I really don't talk about it and elaborate it much on YouTube, aside from, covering price charts and things like that.
yeah. Well, here's the thing. Be open to the fact that none of this stuff is by mistake, and I believe that you're going to find yourself in a situation where people are going to look to you even more than they are now, probably for even more consequential things. And so, I think it's a good that we're connecting within this community, because the friendships that develop out of this. And if there's any way I can assist you, and as you do things in this ecosystem, would love to have you back on. But thank you, and thank you for, it's an encouragement to me to see a guy like you who is so well established in the kind of crypto space see what we've been seeing as well, right? We've been here kind of on an island, and it's so encouraging to have you come in and with your your community and influence. And so awesome to have you. Thank you so much, Donovan.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time as well. Appreciate you having me on. I think you're a great person. It's been an honor to be able to share perspectives and talk back and forth. And my CPA is in Texas, my business is in Texas, so like I do go out there. It'd be fun to link up at
Yeah,
next time
yeah,
I go out,
Central Texas, baby. That's awesome. Well, stick around the green room for a second, and I'll be right back here.
for sure.
Thanks, Donovan. Folks, make sure you subscribe to Donovan. I mean, this is huge, right? There's one thing about hexagons and pulsekins and pulse hexagons, man. We ratio everybody, right? But I think this is the key to show the support, and give him a sub, give him a follow, and encourage him. I mean, this is the future you're looking at, right? I've felt this way about K4K crypto when I first interviewed him. Is that you're looking at the future of all of this stuff, and this is these are the kind of people, and to see this kind of introspection from a younger guy like this is exciting to me. It really is. It's refreshing. And so give him a follow, encourage him, be a part of the, welcoming him into the community, which many have done. And folks, I just appreciate your time. It's going to be one of the most exciting years here, 2024, and probably one of the most consequential. So take care of yourself, take care of others, and do not mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.